Acts 9, verses 1 through 5. But Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, men or women, that he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. Now as he went on his way, he approached Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven shone around him. And falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, Who are you, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting.
Morning again. If you want to leave your Bibles open to Acts chapter 9, my intent for this morning is just to move through this section. It's a long one, but I'm not going to dwell on any one certain point. Tyler already gave away the biggie. There's 10 points this morning, but they're not crazy, I don't think. There's just one thing that I want to do. I just want to read through this story of Saul, who was persecuting Christians, being converted himself, becoming a follower of Christ, and just kind of break it down as we go and say, what can we learn about conversion? Or I think, I might even have this, the heading on this one up here. What does conversion look like? What does this whole process mean for me? I would like for you to not just go through these 10 points and say, write them down like I'm trying to keep up with these 10 things. 1, 2, 3. I want you to go through each one of these things and say, where am I on this list? What's the thing that I have done? What's the thing that I need to do? Where do I need to tighten up and start doing better? There's something on this list for everybody. So let's just move through what we're looking at here this morning. Number 1 is just the realization that every single one of us is coming from the same place. We all have different histories, and we've all made different mistakes, but every single one of us is in the same boat. And that is, we're all coming from a lost and sinful past. If you go back to chapter 7 and verse 58, chapter 7 and verse 58, this is the chapter where Stephen was murdered for preaching. And then in verse 58 it says, they cast him out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their garments at the feet of a young man named Saul. That's our introduction to the person that we're talking about this morning. He was there, and you kind of get the sense of, let's lay our coats down at his feet. You kind of get the sense that he's in charge of the thing. If you read on just a little farther in chapter 8 and verse 1, Saul approved of his execution, and there arose on that day a great persecution against the church in Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout the region of Judea, Samaria, except for the apostles. Jump down to chapter 9 and verses 1 and 2. This is our text for today. Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. I don't care what the key verse is that you want to attach to this point that we're talking about. Mine is Romans 3:23. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That's every single person in this room. Whenever you think about Saul, I'm not going to turn over there and read it. I've got it in my notes, so I'm just going to read it from my paper. But I've got 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 9. This is what Paul said about himself later in his history when he was looking back on this time. He said, I am the least of the apostles, unworthy to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. So as far as I can tell, there are 2 different kinds of people that we need to talk to about this point right now. The first kind is the person who thinks that they're okay. No, you're not. You might look at your life and you might say things like, I haven't done anything really bad to deserve going to hell. I've never killed anybody. I've never started any wars. Like, I'm okay. The thing that we say to that group of people, if you're sitting here today and you're like, Jesus and the gospel is for those people who need it, and I'm not one of those things. No, that's not true. The thing that we're learning about Saul is that we are all Saul. Whether we've done the murder or the persecuting the church or not, we all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Every single one of us is in this boat. The second conversation that we need to have is the person who's sitting there saying, I've sinned way too big and way too much, and God can't possibly want anything to do with me and never would forgive me, even if I wanted to be forgiven. And that's the opposite conversation where we say, hey, look, Saul actively killed his people and went chasing them around his home country, arresting them and dragging them back, and he became a Christian. There's nothing that you can do that God will not offer you his forgiveness. And so, number one, just think about that. We all have a lost and sinful past. Every single one of us is in the same boat. Number two, humility is key. Let's read verses 3 through 8. Now as he went on his way, he approached Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven shone around him. That'll do it. Like, if you're looking for a sign, I can't imagine what this must have felt like. I always try and put myself in the shoes of the people that I'm reading about, and I can't imagine. It would almost be funny for Paul to like immediately, whenever it clicks in his head and he says, oh no, like what have I done? The light from heaven shines around him. Falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, who are you, Lord? He said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But rise and enter the city, and you'll be told what to do. Men who were traveling with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, but seeing no one. Saul rose from the ground. Although his eyes were open, he saw nothing. So they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. I think a little bit about the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son, who took his dad's wealth and went away and lived it up and had a great time. And it was not until he had lost every single thing that he had and was literally eating pig's food that caused him, I love the way that the text reads in that story. It says, and he came to himself. Now, listen, I want to tell you something right now. There's all kinds of ways that, like, I'll say this and then I'll say, no, that's not right. Just go with me here for a second as I work through this one. I want to tell you how to be the best preacher that has ever existed. And it's not like, okay, what do I mean by best preacher? And then I say, no, the most successful preacher who has ever existed. And then I go and I'm like, well, I mean, the prophets, nobody listened to them. You know what I'm talking about? Just go with me here real quick. What is it, like, how are you going to be a really, really good preacher? And I'll tell you, if you can figure this thing out, you have the key to unlock the door to save every lost soul in the world. And I don't know how to do it. I wish I did. If you can find a way to cause a person to know and see and feel that they are at the bottom, that's all that you have to do. Because almost all of us, like even when we are at the bottom, we don't know that we're at the bottom, that it's time to cry out for help. It's this humility thing that we're talking about right now. I was talking to a fella not too long ago who, by every metric imaginable, I'm talking career metrics, family metrics, like personal life, by every metric imaginable, this guy's at the bottom, and I'm sitting here talking with him, and he doesn't know he's at the bottom. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like, how Sometimes it's maybe like a light from heaven just needs to make us all go blind. To slap you upside the head and say, hey, pay attention, please. You are not as awesome and great as you think you are. It took the prodigal son all the way, losing everything, starving and eating pig's food, before he finally said, maybe I'm not in a good spot right now. I don't know how to tell you to be at that spot, but that's the spot where every single one of us needs to be. There is no coming to Christ, and there is no Christianity without opening your eyes, or in Saul's case, closing your eyes and being blind and saying, there's nothing for me. I have done nothing. I can do nothing. It's the humility that we're talking about. In verses 9 through 11, I'm still on the humility point. It says, for 3 days he was without sight and neither ate nor drank. For 3 days he's fasting, no food or drinking. This guy's in a bad spot. And there was a disciple at Damascus named Ananias. The Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias, and he said, here I am, Lord. And the Lord said to him, rise and go to the street called Straight. At the house of Judas, look for a man of Tarsus named Saul, for behold, he is praying. And those are some words that most of us should be like, yeah, he is. He's not eating or drinking. He's praying because he's blind. And he just got, I don't know what that prayer sounded like. I wrote down some options. I can imagine his prayer sounding like this. What have I done? Or how about this one? How could I have possibly been so wrong? I thought everything that I was doing was right and for God. How could I have been completely the opposite wrong on everything? How about this option? I don't want to be blind for the rest of my life. Please, Lord. How about this option? Please show me what I need to do in order to make this right. I don't know what the prayer sounded like. But what I do know is that Saul was humbled. And what I also know is that every single one of us needs to find that humility. Hopefully, you know what would be really cool? Hopefully, you young people up here, I'm not just going to pick on you. This is for everybody. But you guys, like everybody, you know what would be really cool? Is if we could discover this humility and find it without having to eat pig's food first. Or without having to be blinded by God first. Like there's the easy way and there's the hard way. And the ball's in your court. But humility is key. If you want to write down something with this, James chapter 4 and verse 6. In James 4 and verse 6, James quotes from Proverbs 3 and verse 24, and this is what it says. God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. There's no salvation without humility first. Number 3. Let's read verses 17 and 18. So Ananias departed and entered the house, and laying his hands on him, he said, Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road by which you came, has sent me so that you may regain your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit. And immediately something like scales fell from his eyes, and he regained his sight. Then he arose and was baptized. This point is, when you get an answer to your prayer, you have to do something about it. And this is the one that I'm thinking of. And maybe you disagree with me about this. It's likely. It's likely, I'm telling you just right now, like it's likely that I'm very wrong about this point. But I'm going to tell you at least something that I hope is true. I think there's this world full of people out there who are like, what is the right thing for me to do? I don't know that it's most of them, but I would like to think that there is at least a handful of people in this world who genuinely care about what is the right thing to do. What do I need to do? And they're looking for the truth. And so maybe they've come into our lives And we've said, hey, I can show it to you. And so we open up the Bible and we sit down and we study with them. Morgan does this. You've gone through my lessons or just your own conversation with somebody, and you open up the Bible and you're like, here's what it says. This is the truth. And they say, oh, yes, like I see that. And then you say, and this is what you need to do. And it's like, nothing. You got to do something. You can't just know what the answer to the problem is. You have to do something about it. And the same thing, I didn't read the story of the prodigal son earlier, but this is where I would go back. Luke chapter 15 in verses 17 through 20, he came to himself, and then the text says, and then he said, this is what I will do. I will get my stuff, and I'll go home, and I'll say to my father, Father, I've sinned. And he does. He gets up, and he goes home, and he does something about it. This is Saul. He's been humbled. He recognizes that he was wrong, and he's praying, and God sends him an answer. And you come to the end of verse 18, it says, then he arose and was baptized. You have to do something about the problem. That's true for all of us. Number 4, I think it's important for you to know at the very start that there's going to be bumps in the road. Like, let's just acknowledge this right from the start. Go back to chapter 9 and verses 10 through 16. Now there was a disciple at Damascus named Ananias. And the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias, and he said, here I am, Lord. And the Lord said to him, rise and go to the street called Straight. At the house of Judas, look for a man of Tarsus named Saul, for behold, he's praying. And he's seen a vision of a man named Ananias come and lay his hands on him so that he might regain his sight. But Ananias answered, the text says it in a really nice way, but I can imagine Ananias, he's like, I think you got the wrong person, God. Like, I know about that guy. We all know about that guy. And I don't want anything to do with him. Like, my goal in life is to stay as far away from that guy as possible and off of his radar. And you just think about that. Here you are. You have been humbled by God. You're looking for the truth. You're ready to do something about it. And God's people are like, nope, arm's distance. I don't want anything to do with you. I've been in that spot. I'll tell you the story if you want. It's not a story for the whole congregation. Throughout my time in high school, I was very well acquainted with the principal's office and the sheriff's office. And everybody knew it. It's just a part of who it was. And Becky taught me the gospel, and I became a Christian. And my expectation is, I'm a Christian now. So everybody just treat me like I'm a Christian, like I've never done anything wrong. And that's not the way that it works. And it doesn't feel very good. When you're trying to do the right thing, but that stuff from the past is hanging on and it won't turn loose. If you go over later to chapter 9 and verse 26, when they had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples, and they were all afraid of him, for they did not believe that he was a disciple. Paul walks into church and everybody runs in the other direction. I think it's important for all of us to just appreciate that you're going to become a Christian. Great, it's what you should do, but it doesn't mean that the road's just going to be straight and even. Like, there's going to be bumps along the way. It's important for you to know that. Next, look down at verse 19. I want you to go somewhere with me. In my Bible, it's laid out like this. I have the first part of verse 19. It says, and taking food he was strengthened. And then I have a new heading and a gap in the page. And then there's the rest of verse 19 under that gap. It says, for some days he was with the disciples at Damascus. And the reason why my Bible has done this is because that gap on the page is about 3 years of Saul's life. And you can find that in Galatians chapter 1. Go over to Galatians 1 and verse 15. Galatians chapter 1 and verse 15. And I'm going to read, let's see, let's start in verse 18. Galatians 1 and verse 18, it says, then after, so he becomes a Christian, in verse 18, then, I should start sooner. How about verse 15? But when he who had set me apart before I was born, and who called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son to me, in order that I might preach him among the Gentiles, I did not immediately consult with anyone, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me, but I went away into Arabia, that's the desert, and I returned again to Damascus. Verse 18 says, then after 3 years, I went to Jerusalem to visit Peter. And so Paul becomes a Christian, and the very next verse says, in verse 20, immediately he proclaimed Jesus in the synagogue, saying he's the Son of God. But that is immediately after he got back, after being in the desert for 3 years. And this is an important point that I think all of us need to pay some attention to. When you become a Christian, you don't know what you don't know. And the idea is, I've become a Christian, and this happens to, I think, most of us. I think that's true. I become a Christian, and I'm really excited about this faith, and I want to share it with everybody, and I want to tell everybody about Jesus. Great, do it. Please, do it. But one of the things that you need to really pay attention to is that you don't know what you don't know. And it's possible to get some things wrong. That's what happens with Apollos later on in the book of Acts. Apollos is going around preaching, and a couple of people come up to him, and they're like, you're not saying things that are true. And he just didn't know. And so next, what happens? We learn the gospel. We become a Christian. Paul says, I need to go into the desert and get away from everything and figure some stuff out. And I don't know if that's I need to read the Bible again and look for Jesus, or I don't know. I don't know exactly what this looked like. But he took some time to figure some stuff out and to build a foundation. And that's what we all need to be doing. Maybe you're a newer Christian. Maybe you're an older Christian and you haven't done this step yet. You need to be building a foundation. Next. In chapter 9 and verse 21, all who heard him were amazed and said, is not this the man who made havoc in Jerusalem of those who called upon his name? And has he not come here for this purpose, to bring them bound before the chief priest? When people saw Paul, it's weird to say when they saw Saul, when they saw him after this period of 3 years, and now he's preaching the gospel, they look at him and they're like, I don't even know who you are anymore. Didn't you used to think this? Didn't you used to act like this? They look at him and he's a completely changed and different person. I've told you this story a bunch of times. I already mentioned my high school time. I try not to get gas in Platte City where I'm from, especially at the Quick Trip where everybody else goes. Because every single time I see somebody from my childhood, and we go up and it's like, hey, how's it going? And we shake hands and it's like, hey, what are you doing? What do you do for a living? I'm like, I'm a preacher. And they go, what? Like, that's not what I was expecting you to say. That's the second thing they do. The first thing they do is they shake my hand and their eyes go like this. And they look at my bald head. The second thing they do is they say, I can't believe that you're a preacher. Here's the thing. In Acts chapter 19, Acts chapter 3 and verse 19, when Peter's preaching, he says, repent and be converted. Repent and turn back. If you're somebody who's at this stage in the process and you've become a Christian and you've built your foundation, but you still are the same person that you used to be, and you still talk the way that you used to talk, and you still do the things that you used to do, and you're not completely different and unrecognizable from who you were before you were a Christian, you're not doing it right. The thing about Christianity is that we're supposed to be changed. And at some point in our Christian lives, we ought to look very different from the people to the people who used to know us in our past lives. We're supposed to be changed. Look at verse 22. Verse 22 says, Saul increased all the more in strength and confounded the Jews who lived in Damascus by proving that Jesus was the Christ. He increased and he grew and he made forward motion. The way that Paul talks about this in other places in his writings in the New Testament is he says, you can't be a baby who eats milk forever. At some point you have to start eating other things and eating meat. And we grow and things get harder and more difficult and we learn more and our faith begins to get more complex, and it's supposed to be increasing and growing from how it was whenever we first heard the gospel. Maybe this is the spot where you're looking at this list and you're like, okay, this is what I need to think about. I've built my foundation, I've changed my life, but now what I need to do is I need to get in the Word, I need to live that Christian life and grow and increase and grow. Next, chapter 9 and verse 16. This might be one of the ones that is the least fun on this list. You know what? This one is probably less fun than being struck blind from God. Your relationships from the past are going to change if you've become a Christian and move forward. In chapter 9 and verse 16, God says to Ananias, I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name. And you see some of that suffering in verse 23. When many days had passed, the Jews plotted to kill him. These were the people that he was working with and working for. And he changed his mind and he starts doing something different now. And their mindset is not, hey, what's going on here? We used to work together and he has completely changed direction and is doing this thing now. I wonder what's going on. Their mindset is, okay, let's try and kill him now too. These used to be my people. And now they're trying to kill me. If you look down at verses 28 and 29, 28 and 29. So he went in and out among them at Jerusalem, preaching boldly in the name of the Lord. And he spoke and disputed against the Hellenists, but they were seeking to kill him. There it is even more. Jesus said in John chapter 15 that you should expect to be persecuted when you become a Christian. I don't want to sugarcoat anything. If you're somebody who's not a Christian and you're here visiting with us today and you're here by yourself and you're not with your Christian family, or your peer group and your friend group at school is out there and they're like this and you're here at church this morning and you're doing something completely different from this, when you are increasing and growing in your faith and being changed, those relationships are going to change too. That means things are going to maybe be different with your family. Maybe your mom and your dad. Maybe things are not going to be the way they used to be with your family anymore. It's supposed to be that way. Next, only two more. At some point, we need to start teaching other people the truth that we've learned. In Acts chapter 9 and verse 15, the Lord said to him, Go, for he is a chosen instrument of mine to carry my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. Jump down to verse 20. Immediately he proclaimed Jesus in the synagogues, saying, He is the Son of God. I can't imagine what that was like. We used to all be the same, and we all believe the same stuff, and we were all together that those guys are the bad guys, and I show up in your house, in your synagogue one day, and my sermon is, hey guys, we were all wrong. And I'm going to tell you about Jesus now. I can't even imagine. Look at verses 28 and 29. I think that we already read these verses. He goes in and out among the disciples, but he's preaching boldly in the name of the Lord, and he's speaking and disputing against the Hellenists. to the point that they want him dead. Let's do this. There's one other passage, 1 Corinthians 15. I want to read this one in 1 Corinthians 15 in verses 9 through 11. When Paul explains how God was gracious to me and I became a Christian, and now this is what my life is like. The reason why I come here is because what he describes himself as now is saying, I am working hard for the Lord. Like, not just a little bit, not just cruising with my life. I am working hard for the Lord. Look at verses 10 and 11. By the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace toward me was not in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God that was in me. Whether then it was I or they, so we preach, and so you believed. Saul took the same enthusiasm that he had towards persecuting Jesus, and he just converted it to working for Jesus. But the point is, okay, where are you on this list? Maybe you're at the spot where you've been changed, you're growing, you've got a foundation, everything's moving in the right direction. The next step is, let's tell it to other people. We don't just stop and keep it to ourselves. And then finally, this is the last thing on this list anyway, is to get plugged in with a church family. Nobody does this on an island by themselves all alone. If you look at chapter 9 and verse 19, taking food, he was strengthened. Who strengthened him? It was Ananias who was with him right there. Jump down to verse 25. His disciples took him by night and let him down through an opening in the wall, lowering him in a basket. Thank goodness he was plugged in with a church family. Otherwise, he would have been killed by the people that he used to work with. But the disciples were like, hey, you're one of us now. We're going to help you get out of this mess. Jump down to verses 26 through 30. This is the end of the story. When he had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples, and they were all afraid of him, for they did not believe that he was a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles and declared to them how on the road he had seen the Lord, who spoke to him, and how at Damascus he had preached boldly in the name of Jesus. So, this is what Barnabas did for him. So he went in and out among them at Jerusalem, preaching boldly in the name of the Lord. And he spoke and disputed against the Hellenists, but they were seeking to kill him. And when the brothers learned this, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. So the church throughout all Judea and Galilee and Samaria had peace, and it was being built up. I always use Melissa as an example of this one, but I'll give you a break this time. But Melissa's example is really a good one. I said I'll give you a break, but I have to. I have to do this. It's my favorite. It's one of my favorites of all time. Melissa was at school with me, and she used to just be really shy and introverted. And if you know her now, she's not. Seriously, I would guess, we ought to check this just for data. I would guess Melissa locks the door. She's the last one out and locks the door half the time, because she's here talking and she's plugged in. Yeah. And so you ask her, you're like, what happened? How did you go from this to what you are now? And the story, ask her, seriously, especially if this is something that you struggle with. You need to talk with her, because she says, I just decided I didn't want to do it anymore. And I can't imagine how hard it would be to change yourself. But she did. And so I said I was going to give you a break and pick on someone else. Let's pick on somebody who can't defend themselves this morning. It's Carson. Carson used to be more introverted, would mind his own business, would say to himself, and his mom. The reason why I'm talking about Carson in this example is because Saul tried to get in with the church, But they were like, no, you're not doing this. Sometimes you need Barnabas to open the door and walk you into the place with you. Leslie said to Carson, hey, you need to get plugged in with this group and be a part of this thing. That means when you would rather come home and, be done with your day and do all of this other stuff, probably schoolwork with him, I would say sit on the couch and watch TV. That's probably not what he does. But instead of doing that, go. And he did. And so you got, I just think about, Luke and John and Adam, and anytime you're out playing pickleball, you're out doing whatever you guys do, there he is. And it's like, that didn't happen by itself. It's a force of will to say, here are God's people. Some of us just walk into the room and here I am. And I know that's not like that for everybody. And so maybe you're along the road on this list, but you're not this. You've got to watch it because I don't have the words for this. You're not plugged in with the church family. That's the next step. To get plugged in and to be a part of this thing. Maybe Barnabas can help you. Maybe you just got to force it and do it. But the point is that this is a part of what conversion looks like. Okay, I'm done with my notes. Would you do me a favor before we stop? Let's all do this together. Take a look at the list and pinpoint where you are on that slide. It's going to be different for all of us. I'm looking at that list, I expect you probably don't even need me to stand up here and talk about it and think about it. My guess is when we're going through that stuff, you know exactly where you are. That's my guess for all of us probably. Here's what I want to happen for this lesson. I want you to look at that list and say to yourself, today's the day. Maybe you're not a Christian yet. You know what the next step is for you? Humble yourself. To completely empty yourself and humble yourself and come to the Lord and say, here I am. Like, I'm so not here that I'm going to take this old dead person and bury him in the waters of baptism. That is a complete act of humility. It's not me anymore. I'm burying that old dead guy. Maybe that's where you are this morning. Maybe you need to grow. Maybe you need to make a change. Maybe you need to get plugged in with a church family. I don't know which one it is for you. But take a look at that list and decide that today's the day I'm going to do something about it. If we can help you with it, come forward and let us know as we stand and sing the invitation song.